The indictment of Sean Diddy Combs shines a light on human sex trafficking, so making authorities and victim advocates here in Western Mass have a problem that they've been trying to tackle for years.
Western Mass News reporter Reagan Stoddard joins us live in studio after getting answers on the impact this high-profile case could have on efforts here in our area. Reagan?
Abby and Chris, with the arrest of Sean Combs, we hear from experts about just how deep the psychological impact of human trafficking can have on those affected by it.
A sex trafficking case involving music mogul Sean Diddy Combs cracked open on Tuesday after he was indicted by a New York federal grand jury. Western Mass News spoke with Sarah Lickerman, a clinical psychologist at the Bay State Family Advocacy Center, about how this investigation making headlines can help battle the serious issue of human trafficking, even in Western Mass.
It is an opportunity for there to be an increase in awareness, identification, and then support to be developed for people who are currently in the life or victims of or at risk for exploitation and trafficking, and then for survivors to get the healing that they need.
In statistics released in January, Bay State Family Advocate Center and their One Mission Coalition report that since 2021, they have identified 483 trafficked, exploited, or at-risk youth in Hampden County. Lickerman tells us trafficking is an exploitation of a relationship which leads to a misuse of power and control.
And usually feels like a good relationship at first, and there's trust and maybe some secondary gain, whether that is financial or a sense of protection, a sense of just feeling seen and heard, maybe feeling loved.
Many times, this psychological aspect of human trafficking leads to an individual feeling they cannot escape their perpetrator.
And a big piece that this starts is through technology, and there's often can be the development of threats throughout that and this feeling of being trapped because of the psychological coercion.
We are told some specific risk factors that can lead an individual to being sex trafficked and have been tied to cases in Hampden County include high rates of family conflict, problems with parental supervision, seeking connections, social isolation, and an overall lack of awareness.
Here in Western Mass, the Bay State Family Advocate Center One Mission program holds public events to educate the community about human trafficking and what healthcare professionals, law enforcement, and faith-based organizations can do to help identify potential victims. And as for parents, they are urged to closely monitor their children's social media accounts. Reporting in studio, Reagan Stoddard, Western Mass News.